evening after con pub time. And let's see if we can get it to work this time. This is our last one, actually, so I guess it would be poetic if we were unable to get this one to go. Yeah. We had a while there where the Bardic wouldn't run. And,
Oh, really?
Misty tried absolutely everything. And I was in a panel with... I was on the How to Write Cozy panel, Cozy Fantasy Workshop with Travis Baldry and all those other bunch of other folk. And she couldn't get it working.
Looks like we're live.
Oh, looks like we are live. Perfect. Awesome. Right. Well, evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
I'm going to sink back into my very comfy couch. Welcome to the end of Hearthcon, everybody. This is our end of evening pub time here. We've got, unlike all of our other panels and workshops, we have exactly nothing planned for this panel. This is our come chat, ask questions, and share a drink with us after a busy day. Whether your drink of choice is tea or coffee or anything else. So I pop over here and just pass the link off to our Reddit team. Thank you very much to our dear friends at Our Cozy Fantasy, who have been instrumental in ensuring that everybody is able to get to everything. And then I'll send a little note to Misty. Misty, did you send the last panel to the Reddit team?
No.
You should do that.
What do I do?
You just send them it in the Discord and Reddit. There we go. Okay. So I guess we should probably start with introductions, gentlemen. I know who you all are. The readers do or don't necessarily know who you are. What we should do, though, is we should give just a couple minutes here, I think, for people to get in. So, hi.
Sounds good.
Jupiter. I'm one of the hosts here with Lazy Dragon Books. And I'm certain that the story of how Hearthcon came to be will undoubtedly come out in the discussion here as I bemoan the fate of somebody who has decided to run a con with exactly zero experience or time. Pass on. I guess I'll pass it on to Herman.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I'm Herman Steuernagel. I have 10 books published, but one Cozy Fantasy book, the Bartender Between Worlds, which you may have seen on TikTok or Kickstarter or whatnot. It's a fun little story. I also run a podcast called The Greatest Podcast in the Multiverse, where I interview a variety of science fiction and fantasy authors talking about their books and their writing craft and all that jazz. We have a lot of fun. And I've had a lot of cozy authors that you would have seen during the show today on the show. So do go and check that out later on if you're interested in hearing more from them. And we have a lot of fun.
And I am SL Rowland. I write lit RPG and cozy fantasy. Probably the two that I'm best known for are Cursed Cocktails and Sword and Thistle in my Tales of Adria series. And right now I'm working on the third book in that one, hoping to have it out this winter.
We'll probably want to do those introductions again.
Okay.
See more people in. So have you been watching the whole day, Herman, or are you just popping on for the evening?
I was on for the morning. The afternoon I kind of was off for a while because I actually have a Kickstarter that I was trying to fulfill this weekend, so I can get them out in the mail this week. So I didn't catch the afternoon sessions, but I will go back and catch the replays later on. But the morning sessions that I watched were fantastic, and it looks like it's been quite a day, quite a fun-filled day of cozy authors, and writing advice and all sorts of fun stuff. So I'm looking forward to catching up with the rest of it.
Yeah, and well, so you've been
I've
here all day.
Yeah, I'm also in the middle of Kickstarter fulfillment. Can kind of see some of the boxes back there. So I've had it on in the background. And I did the panel earlier on Cozy World Building, which that one was really, really cool. So yeah, you guys have done an awesome job putting this together.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Oh, we've got. I've had a pile of books just tossed up right now. All right. Well, we are sort of 10 minutes into things. Looks like we have a couple people watching. I suspect that this will probably be the quietest of all the panels for lots of reasons.
Yeah, probably
There's
people getting ready for bed.
people getting ready for bed. There's the right now the path to publishing is on, so I suspect that a lot of our watchers are writers.
Oh yeah.
They're probably watching the final last of the publishing, as it's got who's in there? Rebecca Thorne and Think Twice, just talking about all the different paths to publishing. So next year, what we'll probably do is just put this by itself. There we go. That way, everybody's forced to watch us drink.
They only have
Yeah.
they're
Okay. All right. So apparently we have equal amounts, so we can have competing things. All right.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm JollyJupiter. I'm one of the co-founders of Lazy Dragon Books, and I say co-founders as though it was some great thing, and not just a way of dealing with taxes, which is one of those things they don't tell you about as an author.
Right.
Because the assumption is that you won't make any money as an author. So the fact that I make anything at all is quite surprising. I think my family is still not used to it. They're like, yeah. So I write Beers and Beards, which is an alcoholic, dwarf-centric book. Alcoholic being the alcohol, not the state of being. My wife, Misty, she runs I Ran Away to Evil. We write together and edit each other's work and stuff, so it's sort of been from book one, it's been us kind of doing it together. So
Nice.
Yeah. So it is pub night, so what did everybody bring to drink?
Well, I have got a Cabernet Franc from one of my favorite local wineries here in the Okanagan, Noble Ridge Winery. It is a 2022. It's a little young, but I wanted a Pinot Noir, but I guess I was out, so I drank all of it already. So that's what I'm drinking tonight.
And I have a Vino Verde, the white wine, a little sweet, mostly kind of tart and refreshing. I got that because the third book in my Tales of Adrius series, it's called The Halfling's Harvest, and it's about a halfling who owns an inn with an accompanying vineyard and the harvest season. So they'll be harvesting the grapes, and there's a giant harvest festival in town, so it has like all of those like cozy fall vibes.
Yes. Where's the vintage from, or where's the winery?
This one is from Portugal. The winery is Alianca.
Okay. Yeah, I was asking
It
because
has-
Pinot Verde
yeah.
it's a green wine, and that's a Portuguese style. That's what I was asking. We were in Portugal last year, so that was why I asked.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, nice.
Cool. I'm slowly making my way through wines as I prep for my next book here, actually. But I've got a wet hopped beer here, local, called Wolfvine. It's wet hopped, so for those who don't know, I write Beers and Beards is meant to be specifically an educational book. I wrote it in the vein of a specific genre, actually. It's a bigger style in South Korea and Japan, where you essentially you learn about something while you're reading. Hikaru no Go would be an example. Aishio 21, Hajime no Ippo. The idea being that you show sort of a part of real life and show how it actually works, and
Mm.
just for aficionados or people who know nothing about it to try and learn. And so one of the things that came up in book 3, which comes out in a couple weeks here, was wet hopping and dry hopping and the difference between them and what they all mean. The short of it being, wet hopping, it refers to using your hops pretty much right off the vine.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I wanted to make one, and it just so happens that the garden where I work, they grew a bunch of hops and said, "Hey, you want our hops?" And I said, "Sure. What kind?" And they said, "Well, we don't know." Well, it's going to be hard for me to make something if I don't really want to make something if I don't know the ingredients exactly. So
Right.
I've quested them with seeing if they can figure out exactly what kind of hops they've got. Yeah.
So-
What about chat? Feel free to toss what you're drinking into the chat as we finish up the night here. I'm going to pop mine because goodness knows I need it.
So how long do they normally dry hops for?
Depends. So they're just dried, right? So just as you dehydrate anything, you can dehydrate it to various levels.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So the hops themselves, usually it's fairly simple as far as the drying process goes.
Mm.
It gets a little more complex when you start talking about extracts and stuff. So when you go get dried hops, it's pretty much literally just dried hops.
Right. Okay.
That you can use for bittering. I've got my big tankard that I got at Dragon Con with a bottle opener on the front. So just that I can pop things open. It is. There we go.
Beautiful sound.
Yes. So I admit that I am not actually the biggest fan of highly hopped drinks, specifically highly dry hopped drinks. So it will be interesting to see how things go here. Yeah. Since I'm looking at the bottle here, all the local craft breweries, craft brewing is really, really big where I am. And all the craft breweries like to put little sliding scales of bitterness and malt and hops and so on and so forth on their drinks. So cheers, gentlemen. Here's to Hearthcon.
Cheers.
Cheers.
This is where we, of course, we go through our reactions.
So I don't normally drink a lot of white wine. I'm more of a red wine drinker. But for my upcoming book, they mostly produce white wine. So like the halflings, their whole like country, they produce this kind of wine. It's called honey wine because it comes from a honey grape, which has like a very sweet flavor to it. So I imagine it like quite a bit like a kind of like a German Riesling that's like more dry and less sweet. So I've definitely been drinking a little more as my research.
Nice. Do you get to write that wine off that you're using for research then? Is that how that works?
Probably, yeah. Actually,
I do need
there's
to talk to my accountant about that.
yeah, there's you wouldn't really think it, but so I live in St. Louis and Missouri. There are actually probably like 50 or 60 wineries within like an hour and a half drive of me.
Really?
Yeah, not the same quality as like the California coast, but they've done some pretty good stuff. And so I went out and I toured one to like kind of get the lay of the land and see what the process was like for how they decide when to pick the grapes and the whole like winemaking process. I got to go through their cellar, so that was pretty cool.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I've done that for a bunch of the local breweries. I think that's been one of the funnest parts about writing this is just it feels almost like an open ticket to get into cool places, right? You just buy, hey, I'm writing a book. And then people are
Uh-huh.
like, oh, you're writing a book, are you? Sure you are. I'm like, no, look here, it is on Railroad, and here it is on Amazon. Oh my god, you're actually writing a book. Can can I see your brewery and look around? So it's fun, and it's definitely amusing. When I go out drinking, go to the pub with some friends, and talk to the waiter, and then whisked away somewhere, and then yeah,
Yeah,
and
you
come back.
tell somebody you're doing research for a book, you can get it in just about anywhere.
Yeah. I guess on that note, how much what has been your guys' favorite thing to research essentially, and how much does research kind of play into our work? Do you think?
I think it plays a good amount, especially like on the smaller details, the things that can't be explained by like magic. I feel like if you if you can research like those things, like the blacksmithing, the armor, the things that will ground the world in reality, then when you include uh, those more like magical elements, that your reader will buy in a lot easier because you've already proved that you know the basics of like the real stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, for me, it's I mean, for the book that I'm currently working on, which is it's not a direct sequel, but it's in the same universe. It's called The Greatest Pub in the Multiverse, and it's kind of the next book in this series. And I've been crafting new cocktails for it, and so that's been my favorite part of research because I'm actually, I don't want to. My first book, I had pretty basic cocktails, cocktail recipes, because it was really an experiment of what I was writing, and it was something new to me. I didn't really. It was more for fun. This one I wanted to get a little bit more creative with the drink recipes, so I've been able to experiment a little bit. So that is something that's fairly new to me. I'm not a mixologist by any means, so I'm learning. That's been a lot of fun for me. So
Yeah,
Yeah, I go ahead.
go ahead. Oh, well, on the talk of cocktails, so I worked in a restaurant for 10 years before I went full time as a writer. So like I spent a lot of time like learning wines, learning cocktails, things like that. But I actually had a reader who has become a friend. His name's Sean, and he is a bartender. So when I got the idea for Curse Cocktails, I knew I wanted to have like some awesome cocktails that the reader could make at home if they wanted. And I had like a list of like certain vibes I wanted to capture with each one. And he is so he has like an encyclopedia of drinks in his head. So like I sent him like the details I was looking for, and he came back to me with a bunch of cocktails that he thought would fit the particular vibe. And so then I took that and kind of deconstructed it into a fantasy drink with like local spirits from the different areas across the realm that I had created. And so I didn't come up with all of the drinks like by myself. It was kind of a collaborative process. But yeah, I think the book was all the better for having that kind of resource to help me out in the areas where I was a little lacking.
yeah, absolutely.
I think for me, the funnest part of research is the actual research part. Um, I am a teacher full time, so I write part time, and so I just kind of enjoy learning the aspects of it. And it's fun to take something that you kind of something you enjoy that you consider just sort of a hobby, something that you really like, and then turning it into something that you're actually knowledgeable about. I feel like there's a difference between, I can name all of my local craft breweries and I actually know what it all means. I have no doubt that now when I go out to the pub with friends or go over to somebody's house for dinner, they're probably getting tired of the beers planning. I see you have a local IPA there. Do you know what all that means?
Yeah, I mean, so did that play into your obviously your because you were talking about the style that you're writing your story in, where you're kind of explaining what's going on. Your work as a teacher, did that play into teaching in your writing as well?
I think no doubt. Um, I think if I didn't have the same experience, it would be very easy to get bogged down or purple prose it or come across as overly technical, right?
Yeah, right.
Figuring out exactly what technical information to put in and what stuff is a little too much is definitely part of it, right? Because there's a difference between writing a technical document and writing a story, and they're very different things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just balancing, that that storytelling with learning, and so it's not just you're not reading a textbook, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think that's very, very much for those of us who are involved in kind of like the food and drink side of the cozy fantasy. It's important to not get too bogged down with I guess, the nitty gritty details of it because that can take away a bit of the fantasy. Right? You want enough to keep people interested and enough to make it grounded, like you're saying, Steve.
Yeah,
Without
I think there's some like some chapters with when they're crafting the cocktail, like I go through and like I'll describe it step by step as the character's making it. But then at other times, I'll just glance over it because what's happening in the scene is, they're talking to a guest or they're talking to someone else behind the bar, and that's more important than focusing on, the step by step. And I think it's important to, know when to explain, but also know when to glance over and keep the story moving.
Yeah, it's something I'm finding I'm doing a lot more in book three is kind of glossing over the step by step. My One of the things I did when I first set out to start writing Beers and Beards was I actually sat down and said, this is book one's, this is what book one is going to teach, this is what book two is going to teach, and book three was very much more focused on different types of beer. And without giving spoilers, more, shall we say, local versions of beer. And I think that's been something that it's a fine line, right? Like I want to keep showing the step by step of brewing, but at this point, I mean, all of my readers have seen fully, from start to finish, all the steps involved in getting a beer to their tables. Do I really need to show it again, or can I focus on the other stuff?
Do you find that with writing a cozy fantasy? This is what I'm finding writing the book that I'm writing now. That going back to that step by step process, and whether it's making a drink or whatever process you're doing in the book, that it helps break some of that tension and keep it kind of cozy, so that you're not, if something tense is happening, okay, well, why don't we make a drink, and then you can go by the step by step, and it kind of eases some of that tension a little bit and brings it back to that cozy vibe.
100%. Actually, I strongly suspect that's one of the reasons we write the style that we do, and partly why taverns and pubs are so cozy. It's because they've historically always been sort of a place to escape to from the daily grind, right?
Yeah,
Like even back to their original roots there, right? Um,
absolutely.
I think about movies like oh, I forget what it's called, but the British zombie one with let's just go to the pub and wait till everything blows over.
Oh, Shaun of the
Oh,
Dead.
Shaun of the
Shaun
Dead.
of the
Yeah.
Dead. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just watching some scenes from that. People talking about how amazing the cinematography is for it. I think that's actually one of the other things I love is throwing in little references to things like that, where people who are invested in the culture would get it, but to everybody else, it's kind of just
Oh, little Easter eggs. Yeah,
little Easter eggs. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a few of those in mine.
But yeah, I mean, definitely for me, like I mean, part of the reason why, I did a kind of a drink vibe in my cozy fantasy was you get home, it's that feeling that you get home at the end of a long day and you have, a beer or a glass of wine or whatever, and you're able to relax. It's kind of that cozy feeling for me, definitely translated into my story, right?
Yeah. And I think also it's like, when you're crafting a cocktail, for example, you're taking a bunch of separate things and putting them together in a unique way to make something that's really amazing in the end. And, with your character, you either get the option of, if they already know how to do it as they're viewing it, you're telling the story from someone's point of view who has a knowledge of how to do it, so that they'll explain like why I'm using this, why I'm using that, how they play off each other. Or if you have someone who's doing it for the first time, you know, it's kind of like a trial and error thing, and you get to experience that journey of them learning why they're using a particular ingredient, and kind of your reader is learning that alongside them. So like there's a lot of different ways that you can take that knowledge aspect.
We'll nod.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that time of the night. It's the nodding time of the night. Nodding off. What made you guys decide to do a pub or a tavern rather than like a restaurant, or just traveling around brewing or whatever?
I mean, for me at least, it was actually the first ideation of the story was actually around cocktails and around brewing, and more so actually I had the idea for the book I'm working on now before The Bartender Between Worlds, which came out first, but I kind of had this idea for a story in a pub, and it wasn't until I kind of started exploring it that it became cozy. And I realized, oh, this is actually a cozy story, and that's really what I need to write right now, because I had just come off of writing, 9 dystopian and darker stories, and I'm like, this is nice. I need a break. And so really, yeah, the tavern was really the crux of the story before I even realized it was a cozy story. So there wasn't really the thought of, okay, should I do coffee or tea or something like that, because the origin of what I had in my mind was centered around the tavern.
Yeah, I think mine. So like the whole idea for Cursed Cocktails, I was in the middle of writing my lit RPG series, Sinister Troll. I was on book 5 of that when I read Legends and Lattes, and like I read that book and I just like I wanted more of it, and it like sparked this idea of Rowland, the main character, who is a blood mage, and he suffers from chronic pain from using his blood magic. And the premise of the book is that he retires from the Northern Guard, which is this group of basically blood mages and like some foot soldiers that keep these dangerous monsters out of the north from like making their way into the realm, because they have impenetrable hides, and the only way to kind of take them down is to use blood magic. And so after he served his 20 years, he's left with the effects of using blood magic for all that time. So he wants to move somewhere warm that should hopefully help him out as long as he's not using his magic anymore. And like I had that idea in my head while I was still working on the book 5. And my lit RPG books are a lot longer. They're like 120,000 words compared to my cozy fantasy, which is usually like right under 70. So I was working on this for a couple months, and the whole time this idea was just kind of brewing in the back of my head. And like I would jot down little notes as they came to me. And so then like I discovered that the main character, the reason he was up there is because his family had died to one of these attacks, and that was when his magic first manifested. So he went up there, and the only thing that he had from his life before was a book of cocktails that he'd gotten from his father, who had kind of traveled around the realm writing down these recipes. So when he finally is able to retire, he has that book, and he doesn't have anything else. So once he finds his way to this new town, things kind of fall into place for him to open his own tavern. Except he doesn't know anything about making cocktails. So, he pairs up with a local bartender in the area, and they go down the journey together of opening a tavern.
I saw there's a question in the chat about whether did the cozy genre start from Legends and Lattes. I think the answer to that is definitively no. If you ask Travis Baldry, he will say, I think very strongly, no. But I think Legends and Lattes was one that popularized the genre Western-wise.
Yes.
It's been around for the concept's been around in Eastern circles as the SK for quite a while. But Legends and Lattes came out right around the pandemic. I forget exactly their exact time. And I know it was one that sort of really popularized the phrase in Western circles of cozy fantasy. And it sort of scratched the cozy itch for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think Legends and Lattes was kind of the catalyst for the modern cozy fantasy that we're seeing a lot of right now. I think it existed for quite a while before that. The Hobbit is cozy-ish fantasy. A lot of Terry Pratchett's Discworld is kind of on that line. And then you had things like A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, which is cozy-ish, and Howl's Moving Castle. So like those stories have kind of been around, but I think it was the tagline of Legends and Lattes, which is high fantasy with low stakes, that kind of hit the nail on the head of like, this is, people knew how to describe the books that they wanted, the high fantasy with low stakes, and that became what people are calling cozy fantasy now.
Yeah, it also came at the kind of the perfect timing, right? Like it kind of came out in the pandemic when people were looking for something that was nicer, right? Something that would take them away from the doom and gloom of the news cycle, and people latched onto that, and that's kind of where we saw the explosion from there of the popularity of cozy fantasy, because people just were in need of something a little lighter to for their downtime, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think also like just the cover of that book was extremely eye-catching,
For sure.
Green orc with the bright green skin, the Tangerine with the bright pink, and then the kind of the muted colors of the cafe in the background. It just like, it jumps off the page, and like you immediately want to know more about this.
And I know Curses and Cursed Cocktails ran into problems from that, didn't it?
Yeah. So when I first started Cursed Cocktails, I was publishing it on Kindle Vella, which is like their serial platform, like a chapter at a time as I was writing it. And I was calling it Curses and Cocktails. And I'd talked to Travis. I was like, is it okay if I use the same kind of naming convention? He was like, yeah, it's super cool. Like, Dungeons and Dragons has been around. It's for a long time. Like, it's kind of a staple of fantasy. So that was the title I went with. I thought it was super appropriate for the type of story I was telling. And then I released the book, and like the first week that it was out, I was getting a lot of traction on TikTok, but was also getting there was some confusion that I guess the style of the cover, the naming convention, that it was related to Legends and Lattes in some way, and some people were very offended by that. Uh, and so just to kind of nip that in the bud, a week after it was out there, this was before I had the audiobook or the print, luckily. It was just the ebook, so everything was easy to change. I sat down and thought about it, tried to come up with a good name, and then I ended up just going with the name of the bar in the book, which is Curse Cocktails. So close, but different enough to where, like, pretty much as soon as I changed that name, nobody was complaining about it anymore. So I guess it was the smart thing to do in the end.
I remember when that happened because I had just come out with Beers and Beards, and I remember watching all that go down, being like, "Oh, am I going to get in trouble for this too?" But I think the a bunch of dwarves on the cover really kind of cleared that
Yeah.
confusion up.
Well, I think part of it was like I was kind of the one of the first ones in like that second wave of cozy fantasy, and I had chosen to go with that same naming convention. And it's like so far there weren't really any other like new cozy fantasies that had come out and was doing the blank and blank. And then after I changed mine a couple months later, there were a bunch more that came out right around the same time, and they all had that similar style, but the covers were like stylistically a lot different to where it didn't have that same confusion, I guess. And so now it has kind of become, a trend of the genre to go with like that type of title. But I guess I was just a couple months too early on it.
It reminds me of the
Yeah.
the romance genre, a blank of blank and blank.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
absolutely. How many,
After,
how many hundreds of those titles are there,
Yeah.
right?
after a court of thorns and roses, and now you've got
Yeah, they're
just
everywhere.
a blank of blank and blank. It's just absolutely everywhere.
Yeah, they say, right place at the right time, but you can also be the wrong place at the wrong time. So
Yeah,
I mean, it's good though that you were able to get that feedback at a time that you could change it, though, right? Like it wasn't after you had printed 1,000 paperbacks of it, and now it's nice that you were able to pivot and it worked out for you.
yeah, I think I maybe sold a few hundred during that first week. And so some people out there probably still have the ebooks with the curses and cocktails cover on it. But far and away, many more have the current title. So
Did your cover change too?
Well, same cover,
Okay.
just the title,
title.
and I think there was a little extra space on the cover, so then I added the silhouette of a cat. Where before that was where the and symbol. So
yeah.
Nice.
Pet wise, definitely is a thing. Pets are definitely a thing. I think in genre, it feels like everybody has a everybody's got some kind of animal companion at this point. I blame Donut for that more than anything else. It's funny because it's Dungeon Crawler Carl is absolutely not a cozy fantasy, but it feels you can definitely feel the influence of it in a lot of characters and characterizations. Yeah. Not all of us are actually in one of his books.
so yeah, double-edged sword at times.
I know. I've got Penelope the Unigoat in mine, and it's
Nice.
funny because she came about almost by accident. In the early days of my Patreon, one of the things that I would do is I would give the patrons an opportunity to vote on how the story would go, like things like drink names and actually the name of the pub was one of the ones. I had a big list of pubs and essentially like characters who would be a part of the pub, and the Thirsty Goat was the one that ended up being voted on, and it's kind of interesting because Penelope the Unigoat, the prima donna goat, the thirsty goat, has actually become a bit of a fan favorite. The alcoholic Duchess of Drink herself.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of animal companions. Like Curse Cocktails has a dire cat and a spirit fox. The second book, Sword and Thistle, has a dire pig and a little kobold. Um, and then the third one, it has a like an old dire cat with kind of like the white eyes. Like he's so old that he just like wanders around the vineyard. He doesn't even chase away the like bunnies or anything anymore. But I think and most people are pet lovers. And in this genre, I feel like there are a lot of cat lovers that really love, when they're included. But I mean, I've had my dog going on 13 years now, so I always in every book that I've written, there's some kind of animal companion or like magical companion, something. Because I just feel like it's a big part of, I guess, like the human experience is having something that you can't necessarily communicate with, but that still understands you in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems to be almost a staple of cozy fantasy to have some sort of, whether it's an animal or some sort of quirky companion like that, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
who's Legend's quirky companion? Is it the mouse? I think it's the mouse baker.
Or the giant cat.
Oh yeah, I mean giant cat.
Yeah.
Uh,
We got a question in chat. Do you all have a favorite beverage as a result of your research? Favorite new beverage?
I don't know if a favorite new beverage. One thing, the book that I'm working on now, The Greatest Pub in the Multiverse, I'm including mocktail recipes because when I started marketing the Bartender Between Worlds, I had a lot of people asking about, that say they don't drink, but it sounds like, a great idea. So I'm like, well, I'm going to include some mocktail recipes then in the next one. Because I have lots of friends that don't drink, so it just kind of made sense. Through that, in researching what can be used as substitutes, I've been experimenting with different teas, and I found this butterfly pea tea that is purple, that kind of mimicked the color of a drink that I had, kind of came up with, and I'd never heard of it before. And so I ordered some and tried it, and I absolutely love it. So it's not a alcoholic drink, but I have a new tea that's one of my favorites. So that's something that's come about out of my research.
you can actually, there's a lot of actual like cocktail recipes that use tea as a
Yeah,
especially like herbal teas and stuff like that, hibiscus tea, things like that for part of the recipes. They can add
I
like
know. It's
a whole new like flavor profile. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole new world that I'm delving into because like I said, I'm not a mixologist, so a lot of this stuff I'm learning as I go, right? So that's definitely one of the things that I've come across.
I've got a
Yeah.
story
And
for learning side of things, but I think for me, my favorite drink, ironically, I guess, as I came to better understand kind of all the minutia of the differences between lots of different types of beer, because it's one thing to like, I know what an IPA is, I know what a porter is, I know what a stout is, yada 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 yada. It's another thing to understand the absolute differences that go into everything. Um, and then you start to see patterns both in the beers as well as your favorites that you wouldn't have noticed before when it was just, it's like saying, I like cookies, and then as you do more and more baking and understand the difference between cookies, you can be like, well, actually specifically I like cookies that have lots of butter in them, right? And I've found as I've been doing this that I'm definitely a lager guy. I prefer. Doesn't matter which lager. I far prefer lagers to ales, just in the general sense. So now when I go to the pub or I go pick up a beer, I'm pretty much always checking for whether or not it's a lager, which ironically it's not a lager; it's a pale ale. But not bad.
So what is the difference between a lager and an ale?
If he's putting me on the spot. So there's a couple differences. The biggest one is which of the type of yeast that gets used. When you're talking about sort of the lagers versus ales, the biggest difference is you've got top fermentation and bottom fermentation,
Hmm.
where sort of it depends on whether or not it ferments at the top or ferments on the bottom. And lagers are what are called bottom fermentation. So
Okay.
I'm trying to remember what, you know, end of the day here, but
That,
top
and that's
versus
fine.
bottom fermentation. But the term lager actually specifically comes from the fact that they go through a process called lagering. I think the Germans for the name. And it's lagering specifically refers to sitting and chilling the beer as it ferments for an extended period of time.
Hmm.
So lagers actually can take several weeks to several months if you wanted to actually ferment if you properly do it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And so what's the difference in the flavor profiles of the two that you enjoy the lagers more?
Lagers, generally speaking, are crisper.
Okay.
They're a little crisper. They're if you had to for somebody who has zero kind of experience with them at all, you could think of a lager has more of the consistency of a ginger ale, whereas an ale would maybe have more of the consistency of a Coke, and a porter and a stout. You're looking more at the consistency of a root beer. If you're a layman, and I'm trying to butcher the fine details of it, somewhere there's some beer aficionados like, did he just? Right?
Yeah.
But I do like crisp in my drinks, so I appreciate that. Sometimes I want something a little meatier, and then I'll go grab myself a stout or a porter. But
Nice.
a lager pretty much is always refreshing to drink, and you can find a lot of lagers that are a little lighter. And so if you're, I kind of just want a water, but I don't really just want a water, then a lager's nice for that.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's funny. Are kind of one of the, not that I mind a lager, but I enjoy pale ales. I enjoy hazy, especially hazy pale ales and hazy IPAs, which I know people are going to roll their eyes at, but that is what I enjoy, the citrus flavors of those. So yeah, I'm just curious mostly.
Yeah, no, and learning all that has been part of the fun, certainly. All right, we've been going for a while. You guys have been drinking your drinks. Let's hear a description a la your character, right? We've all done it. We all know what I'm talking about. Yes, it has faint notes of hickory and has yes, licoricey overtones.
Well, the Vino Verde, it's a little sweet. It's got a nice, like, refreshing finish on it. Definitely some citrus notes in there. It's like a really good summer drink. Great for, like, if you're on a patio. Nothing too heavy. You could definitely drink a few of these and not think twice about it.
I think twice is in the other panel.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, my like tasting notes, especially like the smells of wine. I love wine, but I cannot smell anything you tell me that I should smell. I'll smell it. It doesn't matter what it is or if it's actually there or not. My wife has the nose for wine. So I am drinking a Cab Franc. I won't tell you what's on the nose because I can never tell you. But, the flavor profile of it is, the raspberry, blackberry. It's definitely got a bit of a woodsy smell to it. And the finish, definitely lingers. It's a really nice finish on it. So If I'm looking for smelling notes, I always have to ask my wife what she smells because she's great at it.
I think
Yeah.
wine is interesting because if you give 5 people the same glass of wine and you put them in separate rooms and you try to tell them to describe it, you're going to get 5 different descriptions
Totally.
because I think one, because everyone has a different perception of what they think things smell and taste like. So like what they might be describing the same taste, but are describing it in 2 different ways because of what they associate with that taste.
Hmm.
It's like when somebody
And
says it tastes like dog shit. You're kind of like, well, how do you know?
one of my most interesting things is like there's actually a flavor profile of red wine that they call like barnyard funk, which
Yeah.
is like the smell of like manure and stuff. And like it's a way that a lot of like older aged wines are described as having that taste, but like in a in a very appreciative way, instead of like when you think of that as like it'd be disgusting, but I don't know, there's just
Yeah. I like to refer to that as earthy because it seems a little bit more palatable. But that's
Yeah.
a big, a heavy, like I like my Pinot Noirs a little darker than the classic Burgundy style. And that's a kind of a note in kind of the heavier Pinot Noirs, and which I really enjoy. But yeah, earthiness is kind of what I what I gravitate
Yeah.
towards because it's a little bit, it sounds better for something I'm putting in my mouth.
I think we got
for sure.
the next big TikTok challenge there. Just a glass of barnyard funk wine with some stinky cheese and maybe that horrific Norwegian fish in a
Yeah,
can
that's
that I've been hearing of. Yeah,
someone's heaven.
Yeah. Yeah, for the beers, I find because it's you're smelling the smell of essentially the fermentation. You're almost always going to come across as it's always going to come across as kind of earthy for beer, right? Because it's generally speaking, it's barley, malted wheat, malted something, and then fermented. So unlike fruits, I think where wines, you've got all kinds of different fruits you can stick in there. For beers, they're often going to all smell kind of similar, unless they've stuck some adjuncts in there. Adjuncts being various additives. Right now, the most popular, of course, being pumpkin. But the wine one's going to be interesting because I don't really have a nose for wine, and so I'm going to write book 4 here, which is a lot of wine in it, and so I'm looking at sommelier courses, and they're really expensive.
Yeah.
Things I didn't think I was going to be doing 3 years ago was going to get my sommelier certification and looking at the sticker price and being like, I mean, it's a business expense. And I get to say, I'm a sommelier, but the book is $400 cheaper, and it's not like I'm trying to get a job.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's probably more information than what you actually need because those courses they're looking at different regions and different sub-regions and sub-regions. I've looked at those sorts of courses in the past as well. I actually took the entry level like WSET 1 and maybe the 2 as well, and then the 3 and 4 is where it starts to get really expensive, right? But they're really training you to be able to pick out a wine from any region in the world and be able to flavor profile it, right?
Yeah. I was looking at the WSET one, and
Nice.
they're even just those ones locally are expensive, and the timing on them is not great because it's like they expect you to take a whole day off to go to one of the in-person classes and the online classes. It's like, well, why am I paying a bunch of money for online? And then I found out most of it's actually for the exam because there's an exam for it. We're like, just here's the book. Just read the book, and you don't have to write the test unless you actually want to be able to say you're a sommelier or
Right.
you've completed your WSET 1. And I'm like, well, I don't really need to, but it would look really cool on the byline, right? You know, Beers and Beards by JollyJupiter, sommelier.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah.
So you're both working on a project now that has wine involved. That's kind of the direction you're going.
Yeah, when I this was a kind of an interesting project for me because when I first started it, I thought I was gonna just plot the whole thing out. Like I'm not really much of a plotter. Mostly I will pants it, and then once I get to a certain point in the story, I'll have guideposts of like things that I know that are going to happen, and then I'll just write from one to the next. But for this one, I was like, I'm gonna plot it chapter by chapter from the beginning, and I was having such a hard time with it, and like in the end, I just discovered because like that's not how I write. I need the freedom to like I'm a very slow writer, so often my ideas marinate between one session to the next. And so when I was plotting it, I thought a lot of the focus was going to be on the vineyard and on the winemaking process and everything that goes into that. But I ended up just like scratching all of that and kind of starting my normal process, which is just writing into the dark at the beginning and just see where it goes. And then I begin to realize that really it's more about the inn and the guests that stop by the inn and the harvest festival and the winery, the winemaking process, all of that is flavor and backdrop because at the end of the day it's a story about people and who you meet and how the harvest festival like brings this community together, and the wine tasting is a huge part of the harvest festival, and it's a huge part of the main character's life because her father has won like so many of the wine contests, and she's taken over the vineyard for 10 years and still hasn't won anything. So like that's kind of the albatross around her neck, so to speak. But the the wine is kind of it's a little bit of the flavor that makes the whole story kind of come together.
That's interesting because mine is almost the exact opposite, right? So for Beers and Beards, if you don't know, the plot is about a Canadian vintner slash brewer who dies and arrives in another world as a dwarf and discovers to his horror that dwarven beer hasn't been improved upon in millennia as it's sort of a sacred drink to the dwarves. And so he takes it upon himself to save beer, which I always got giggles about as I was writing. Hey, what's the grand plot? Save the world? No, save beer. Uh, and so the main kind of theme of it is the exact process of beer making down to like the type of water used and the I guess the story is the backdrop for the beer making, which is fun on its own. It's a stylistic choice. So when I'm a plotter slash pantser. So I've got Excel spreadsheets that are several pages long of just this plot, 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 and then you know this drink, this drink, this drink, this drink, this drink, this drink. So I've got just pages of this drink here, this drink here, this drink here, this drink here. And book one was always meant to be about the process of beer making in general. Then book two was meant to be different types of beer. And book three was meant to move into kind of like what happens is you mix beer and magic and more esoteric side of things. And then book four was always meant to be wine and mead, with maybe a book five planned out possibly for mixed drinks. But I've kind of been like, I kind of want to start a new series here. I'm happy with where book four kind of will nicely tie everything up. It'll be pretty big. I suspect it'll be the biggest out of all of them. And book one's 180,000 words. Book two is 160.
Wow.
Book three is like 185. So book
Wow.
four is probably going to end up around 200 here. Oh,
Yeah,
so
that's,
I mean,
that's
they're
the difference between lit RPG, cozy fantasy, and traditional cozy fantasy.
yeah. That's
I
the
think.
hardest part is looking at my. I get that occasionally in reviews. It's like this could have been $2. I'm like, I know, I could have doubled my money.
But if you split it into 2 books, then the lit RPG readers will say they're too short.
Yeah, that's exactly the problem. That's that is the issue with lit RPG, is the expectation of a 20-hour audiobook.
Hmm. I've yet to accomplish that outside of a box set. And I mean, my books are, closing in on 120,000 words, which is a pretty decent size, but like by lit RPG standards, that's small. And then my cozy fantasy is just like, they won't even look at it.
Well, we're coming up on the end of the evening here. It's been fun. For those who have never heard the story of how kind of Hearthcon came to be, just gather around the fire, children. As Jolly tells you a story of might and magic and a wife with an iron stick. My darling wife here, Misty Neptune, we write together, so she edits my books, I edit her books. We bounce ideas off each other. Every once in a while she'll be like, no, that's a terrible idea, and that solves things. And then she'll come to me the next day and like, how do I solve this? And I'll throw ideas at her until one of them sticks. And one day she came to me with one of those ideas where I left her alone for 30 minutes. Just 30 minutes. That was all. And I come back over and she says, hey. And I say, hey. And she says, so I might have started a con and already had 40 authors sign up for it. Oh, good call. So what's the plan? Well, I have this idea for like 18 panels, and then we'll go from there. Okay. Do tell. And I think it went off not bad. We've learned some stuff that we can fix next time. We definitely ran into some sound issues. I know anybody watching this after the fact, you're going to hear a crackle that's not quite as bad as what everybody else has gotten. It seems to be an issue with latency that we are unable to solve kind of on our client end here. But I think everybody had fun, both watchers and the authors. We made this for, I feel like all the authors made this for our various readers and other authors who are looking at this afterwards, but really this was fun for us.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's been a great experience, a lot of good panels, questions, and I hope it continues next year. I don't know how many people know, but I was actually the one who started the Cozy Fantasy subreddit almost 2 years ago, and I've watched that grow from just me to like I think we crossed 41,000 members a couple of days ago. So I think like the cozy community is alive and well, and hopefully it keeps growing.
Yeah, I think my favorite part has been the very little amount of moderating that any of the chats have required. So thank you, chat. As we were running around, desperately checking, making sure the chats were good. That was definitely a concern of ours, but things went off pretty well. Our chat, you've been awesome, all of you people watching. And if you got any last questions here as we run down for the night in our various panels, this is your last chance. If you have any questions, either guess about Hearthcon, Misty will walk over here, maybe answer some questions as well. If you want to pop into frame without breaking my headphones, that would be amazing.
What I miss?
So this is Misty over here.
Hey guys.
Hi. And yeah, so if you've got any any questions either for the pub or for myself and Misty as we close things off here, or for Sean, if Steve, if you've got questions for Steve with regards to Cozy Fantasy subreddit or Cozy Fantasy in general, or if you just want to throw hearts our way, we also are accepting of hearts. In Cozy Fantasy, those are practically currency. Of course, we encourage you all to go out and buy a bunch of Cozy Fantasy books tomorrow for the Cozy the Day Away.
So, so a couple
it's
things.
on there.
Oh, it's on here? Okay. Now, the Cozy the Day Away sale, if you go Cozy the Day Away, it's posted all over the R Cozy Fantasy. You just type Cozy the Day Away. And you can also Google or search it. I know people aren't Googling things anymore, but apparently it's a thing. And as of tomorrow, so if you search it today, there will be nothing. But if you search it tomorrow, there will be, I think it's like 84 different Cozy Fantasies are being featured on sale, whether they're just straight up for free, or they are on discount, or they are on like for $1. I know, did Steve get a chance to talk about his Kindle sale?
No, I don't think I've talked about that. But so the website is promisepress.org. That's where the sale and all the links will be posted tomorrow. Some of the authors have already put their books on sale. So Cursed Cocktails, if you're in the US or the UK, the ebook is 99 cents, I think, until Friday. And a lot of authors are doing 99 cents or free. Some even have a few audiobooks or print books discounted. So there's a lot of good stuff out there.
I forgot my audiobook is on sale today for $7.99. I should have told people, but I didn't.
Yes, her book is on her audiobook is on sale right now as well.
Nice.
You can find all our stuff on lazydragonbooks.com. Feel free to drop by and eat our bandwidth and take a look at our backlog there.
Yeah, and the Bartender Between Worlds is also part of the Cozy the Day Away sale. 99 cents on my website only, so direct sales, but the link will be there. So hermansteuernagel.com. And for the first time ever, it'll be available for 99 cents, but only direct through my web store.
Yeah, and I think it's been fun. I think we'll definitely do this again next year. We'll take what we've learned and improve it for next time. I know the first thing will probably be spread it across 2 days rather than 1 day. We kind of stuffed it into 1 day here because our 4-year-old daughter would not have survived 2 days of all of this. She's been being babysat by one of her wonderful friends who we say babysat, but it's a play date. That's what we're calling it. And 2 days would have been a little much at church, so maybe next year she'll be able to maybe join in and watch and take part. She'll be a little bit older, who knows. But I think, across 2 days, maybe only 2 rooms instead of 3, so that we're not trying to separate things. But, we'll figure it out. But I think we'll definitely do it again. So, one last cheers for the night, everyone.
Very cool.
We got
Cheers.
one last question, but I think we're at the end of the day. So cheers for Crack and Annie, as they say in Beers and Beards. Do you guys have any cheers that you have in your books?
They just say cheers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, and we'll call it a night.
All right. Thank you again.
Yep. Thank you. It's been a great time.